Perfect. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us today for our short take webinar, which is our summer series where we just take a little. Our intent is to get folks a little bit of information, but it's really good quality content. And today's focus is on HR, creating and maintaining your policy manuals. And we've got Danny and Renee from the HR Collaborative with us today to speak on that. So we're super duper excited to have them presenting. They've got a wealth of knowledge and expertise in this area. Once they're through their presentation, we've also asked a handful of SCD employees that have gone through the process of developing policy manuals to just share their real world experience and perspective. And so I hope in about 30-ish minutes or so, we'll give you all a good crash course on creating and maintaining your policy manuals and just also a little real world perspective to help set you up for success. So with that being said, we will jump into it and I will hand things off to Danny.
Great. Thanks so much. I am going to go ahead and just get this up, and you can see my screen okay?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. And I just turn off my camera to make sure my computer stays good here. Sometimes I get a little glitchy. So again, my name is Danny Krause, and I am staff legal counsel with the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. I also have Renee Condos here with me. She is the Administrative Services Manager with the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, but we also represent the HR Collaborative as well, which is a program through the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. And if you're not familiar with the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, we do offer coverage for most of the soil conservation districts in the state. So that's how we really play into what we offer to the group here today. But I'm excited to be here, and I want to talk about a topic that may not always feel urgent, but it's something that's critically important to a lot of your organizations, and that is HR policy manuals, or some groups call them employee handbooks. And I've worked with a lot of local government entities like yours, and I understand that soil conservation districts operate with lean teams, and a lot of them operate and wear a lot of different hats. So this session is designed to really be practical and flexible to that reality. So I want to walk through how to get your manual started or updated if you have one, what are some key policies to include, and how to use tools like the HR Collaborative that we facilitate here at NDRF. And we'll also tackle some common questions and challenges. So with that, just a quick disclaimer that this presentation is for informational purposes only and is not legal advice. So our agenda here, like I said, I want to touch on several areas, including how to get your policy manual or employee handbook started. We'll also discuss some key items every policy should include. The HR Collaborative also has various resources that can assist as you put your policy manual together. So we will touch on those, including the HR Collaborative reference guide and the core standards and checklist. And then some frequently asked questions, and we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. So like I said, I did have some quick poll questions. So Amber, if you have this one, first is, do you currently have an HR policy manual, or like I said, an employee handbook is kind of the same thing. So if you have yes or no for that first one. Second question, what is your most common HR question that you hear? Leave time off, so FMLA, ADA, hiring practices, conduct discipline, or is it in the other category? Third question, if you do have a manual, what's one thing that you've added recently based on a concern or an incident that you might have had? Is it a new leave policy? So like I said, in your FMLA, ADA category, social media use, safety procedures, or other? All right. Are we able to see what some of those look like?
Just waiting to see if we're
Yeah,
gonna get everyone to answer. We've got quite a few, so
awesome.
I'm gonna wait like a couple more seconds to see.
Sure.
Da-da-da.
I'm impressed. More SCDs have HR policy manuals than what I expected. So good job, everybody.
That's great.
All right, I'm gonna end it. Share results. I don't know how that works. So
Okay, wow. Okay, so everyone that answered does have some sort of HR policy manual or employee handbook. That's great. Because something is better than nothing. So a lot of the common HR questions are leave time off. That's not surprising. Hiring practices, that's something we get a lot of. New leave policies, safety procedure, others. If you answered other, if you could put it into the chat, that'd be great. What your other was that you added. And then we could talk about that. I'd be curious to see what that is. But I'll go ahead and jump in. So let's talk a little bit about why a policy manual matters. For many of you, you may have a few policies. Everyone said they had one, but it may be a few policies scattered in different folders. That's frequently what I see is you might have a piecemeal approach of, we have an FMLA policy here, we have a leave policy here, we have health insurance benefits here. That's what someone answered here, establishing health insurance benefits. So you might just have, a few pieces of paper here and there. So when expectations aren't written down, things can get really inconsistent. So one employee might get unpaid leave approved, another might not. Time cards might get handled differently. So that inconsistency really creates risk, not just for lawsuits, but for employee morale. Your employee manual is also a critical tool if you need to show compliance with employment laws. So that's where, me with my employment law background, it's really critical to have those things written down. I'll want to come in and say, what's your policy on this? Having that in one place written down is really going to be critical to have that fairness, clarity, and trust for your team and your employees going forward. So how to get started, everyone already has something, it sounds like, but if you're going to be updating what you have, where can you start? So if you have something, it might be something that you pulled, off the shelf. Identifying your district's unique needs. That's where I always tell people to start. So assess what your district actually needs. How many employees do you have? Do you have seasonal help or shared roles? You want to really create a manual that is specific to what you need and what you're going to use. So really take a deep dive into your staffing needs. Second, so with everyone already having something, you'll really be starting with step 2, basically. So review your existing policies or handbooks that you have. Take a look at what you already have in place and make sure that they're still relevant. So look at your old documents and notes that you have and make sure that they're either still relevant or modify those. It's easier to, take something that you already have, get those up to date and make sure that they're current with new laws, regulations, any new case law that's come out. Employment laws are frequently changing, so make sure that they are the most current and up to date. Something that we see a lot is making sure that you have a structure that really fits your district size and staffing. So choose a simple format and a structure. You don't need something that's overly complex just because, someone tells you that it looks pretty. You can have something that's very simple. It doesn't need to be fancy. Most are going to be digital now, but it can be something that's pretty simple and straightforward. Step 4, I always recommend assigning someone to be in charge of drafting and reviewing the responsibilities for keeping this all up to date. And if this is going to be more of a modification project, setting a timeline of what's practical for reviewing and making sure that it's updated. So, for example, set a month for we're going to review it in August. We will get it, then those edits reviewed in September, and we'll get it finalized and approved in October. So you have that timeline and expectations really just laid out so everyone is on the same page. So here's a recommended structure you can use as your table of contents. So if you don't really have a finite manual already, here's something that you can have as kind of a starting place. So start with a simple introduction, who you are and why the manual exists. Include a summary of your board and your mission. It's always nice to know who you are, what you stand for, then add your policies group by topic. So classifications, leave, conduct, safety, and so on. And then really customize it to your operations. So if you issue field gear or you use state equipment, include those policies. And this layout is really going to help staff and your board find answers fast. Some key items every policy should include. First, include a purpose. So, policies might just be something that's thrown on a page, but I always recommend that you have something that's really cohesive and really mirror each other. So I always recommend that you have your purpose, why the policy exists. Second, have a scope. Who does it apply to? Is it all employees or just certain ones? Third, you're going to have your actual policy language. This usually includes the responsibilities of employees being laid out. And fourth, the procedure and how to carry it out. If there are any defined terms, it's always helpful to have those definitions in there. You can have them, at the top under your purpose and scope. They can be defined throughout, but it's always helpful to have those key terms defined in the policy just in case anyone questions what they might be, especially if there's something that is in statute or in the law. It's always helpful to have them in your policy as well, just so you don't have to be referring back to the century code or case law every time. So it's always nice to have them in your policies. Some examples I had were if you have seasonal or temporary employees, those are nice to have in there. If it relates to a law, reference that law. And most importantly, don't just write it down and forget it. Commit to an annual review. So, like I said before, have someone who's in charge of this project and make sure that they're doing annual updates and reviews because these laws can change on a yearly basis, at least every few years. So it's important to have that reminder every year. Here are some policies I recommend all districts include. So these are important to go back and make sure you do have in your manuals already. An equal employment opportunity policy is legally required, so I'm sure you all have it, but something just to double check. It shows that your organization prohibits things like discrimination based on protected categories like race, religion, gender, age, etc. Harassment and respectful workplace policies similarly set expectations and protect your employees and your entity. Timekeeping and leave policies will help prevent disputes and make sure all employees understand your rules. Things like district vehicle and equipment policies are important if you have staff who drive or work in the field. Social media policies are becoming really important now, where we have increasingly number of social media platforms and younger generations who are entering the workforce. And drug-free policies are something that, we really need to set expectations as well. So these aren't just legal, they're really practical to have in our policies. So just a few final tips for our policies. So really keep your writing simple and clear. Like I said, it doesn't have to be overly robust or pretty. It just needs to be clear and understandable, and really use consistent formatting. So your same fonts, headings, spacings, and then making sure your policies are approved if it needs to be approved by your board. And then don't hesitate to ask for help. The HR Collaborative, we're a free service through NADERF. I'm here to assist Renee. She's the new executive director. We're always just a phone call or an email away. Like I said, this is a free service. We'd rather you reach out to us. Just send an email, quick question on, is this something that's required? What do you think about this policy? We're always happy to answer your questions. If you have HR, your state's attorney can help review, but we'd rather get these questions early before you run into a tricky legal situation. Usually at that point, your state's attorney will have to get involved. You have to get outside counsel, and that's when things get expensive really fast. So we'd rather get the questions super early on where we can just have a quick phone call. And finally, don't just borrow policies from another entity unless you really adapt them for your organization. So like I said, make sure you're considering your district size and your actual needs. They need to reflect your structure, your staffing, and the risks that you see on a daily basis. So just again, some best practices for maintaining your handbook, assigning that one person or just a few people, schedule that annual review, track updates with version history. I always encourage that, keep those multiple versions so like, what did we have last year? What are we looking to change this year? And then notifying employees of your updates. I always encourage having some sort of acknowledgement page where you have your employees signing off that, yep, I was notified that we made these changes, I reviewed them, and I signed off. So if you get an EEOC complaint or a Department of Labor complaint, you have that piece of paper that says the employee reviewed it, they were aware of it, and it's much harder to have an employee then say, well, I didn't know. You have that piece of paper that says, I reviewed the policies, the handbooks. They have that piece of paper that says they were aware. Again, I just have a link here on the NDRF website to the HR collaborative. I wanted to make sure everyone, if you aren't already a member, please go ahead and sign up. It is a free service for any NDRF member, and all the soil conservation districts in the state, I believe, are NDRF members, so you should be eligible. This is a free service, so I did include this. Just link at the top of our website. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Hannah, for including those. And I did hopefully have these links here, and I just wanted to pop these in so you could get a, if you've never seen these guides before, here's our HR reference guide. And the very first chapter starts off with policy manuals. So as you can see, we stress the importance of these. We have links to some policy or employee handbooks, just as some references to some good entities that have them out there. We're in the process of updating these. So you can see some sample policies. Like I said, you can go ahead and just model yours after these, see some of the new samples that are coming out. So if you don't have these for yourself, you can model yours after these. And the reference guide goes through in 5 chapters, just the different areas that your group could really run into. So we're in the process of updating the reference guide. And one of the most notable enhancements that we're updating is the addition of internal investigations. So that'll be a new upcoming chapter with this latest addition. There's also the standards and checklists that you can check out on the HR website. And this kind of just gives you a benchmark of where you are. So if you wanted to look at your policy manual and just kind of get a gauge of where you're at with yours, you can see, you know, is it fully implemented, partially implemented, limited implementation? You can kind of just get a gauge of where you're at with your current policy manual, where you may have some room for improvement, and just kind of see where you may need to beef it up a little bit. So that is on our website. And then if you're looking for any trainings, not necessarily in the policy space, but if there are some HR trainings that you may be looking for, there are some trainings on the local GovU platform on the NDRF website. So those are available as well if there's any specific areas that you may be looking for. So I did include that. So, you know, there are some professional development courses, safety courses, and some basic HR courses. So I encourage you to check those out as well. I did include some frequently asked common questions. Question 1, do we need a handbook if we only have a few employees? Everyone here has already implemented one, so that is great because my response is always yes. No matter what, I encourage people to have some sort of policy for your employees because no matter what, you're going to have employee issues. If you have employees, some situation is going to come up. So I always encourage any sort of potential problem. If you have something in writing, it is going to help you immensely. Another question we commonly hear is, can the board adopt the handbook formally? And absolutely, this is a good practice to do. So if you don't have your board involved, I would recommend that they be involved in this process because that way the board really knows what your district is doing, and they have some visibility and insight into what is going on a day-to-day basis as well. A question that we hear is, what if we use state benefit programs? And that sometimes comes up, and that's something, clarify where there's crossovers. If there are questions, as to what benefit applies, what do we implement? That's always something that's helpful to have written down, just so employees know what the expectations are. And another question we often hear is, do we need a lawyer to review every policy? And I would say not always. Some of these are not highly technical legal issues, but if it is something that is high risk, like termination, harassment, it might be something that you want to have an attorney review. But like I said, the HR collaborative, we're here to assist. We can give you an opinion as to, yeah, we think that's good, or here's some tweaks that we would recommend based on best practices that we see. I am a licensed attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but I can give you my recommended, my best practices. Renee, she's the executive director, like I mentioned, we'll give you our recommended language. We can give you that first pass. Your state's attorney, they're really bogged down, so they might not be able to flip something back as quickly as we can, but we're always going to be great resources for you. So we're happy to help as best as we can. Here's our contact information. So you can always reach out to us. If you send us something at the HR collaborative at nadurf.com. We also have our technical assistance committee. If we can't help you, we'll send something around to everyone at the committee, see if they have any recommended, resources. So there's a lot of help out there. We're going to help as much as we can. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them, put them in the chat, or send us an email after. I know that we had some other speakers, so I won't take up any more of your time, but thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hannah or Amber.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. Yeah, folks, if you have questions, please pop them into the chat. I'm going to take some time to call on some of our SCD employees that have some experience creating policy manuals to share their perspective. And I'm thinking I will call on Williams County first. So there's Amy and Ramona. They helped Molly. They started from ground zero, like totally created a new employees manual and everything. And I'm just really curious from your guys' perspective, that can be a very daunting task. How did you guys keep the momentum going to make sure you finished that project?
Can you hear me, Hannah?
Yes.
Okay, this is Ramona. When I started, we had policies on this piece of paper, that piece of paper, and this manual, that manual. So they were scattered everywhere. And one of our supervisors, there had been an employee issue prior to me starting. They wanted, some clarification. Was our manager able to do anything, or was it something that they had to take to the board? And so it was kind of brought up, that we needed a handbook policy manual immediately. I mean, it was brought up even in my interview that was something that, and I had put together a handbook at a prior place of employment. And so Molly had found a template, and we kind of gathered what information we had scattered everywhere and used this template to kind of put it all together. And then we took it to the board, and they recommended that we have it legally looked at. And so we contacted an attorney and had them look at that. And at that point, our safety was one sheet, and she suggested that we go a step further and even have our safety policy looked at and redone. So that was kind of how the handbook came together. And now I'll just let Amy kind of talk to you about the safety policies.
Yeah, so when I first started, it was kind of my task to discover what there could be for safety policies. We did get in contact with a really awesome company that, came with us. We kind of told them what we wanted with everything, with our watershed, with our tree season, even just day-to-day activities. And they kind of went forward to, we scheduled countless meetings with them. We sat down with them and really discussed what we were looking for. We have checking sheets for all of our equipment. So during tree season, every single day, I had to do a checkout sheet for not only the pickup I drove, but the tractor that we were in and the tree machine and the trailer, just to make sure that everything was highlighted of what could go wrong, and we could pinpoint exactly where things were. And then also help develop, as Ramona was saying, that hierarchy of, this is the point of contact. If, and you can work your way up from there to discuss different things.
How helpful was it to hire someone to help you with this process? And how do you how critical do you think that was?
I'm gonna go
I think it
step in
was
there. Oh, and Amy.
No, go Ramona.
I think because we do have limited staff, it not only was a time thing that, we can, like I said, we can compile things, but as far as having that final, and especially with the safety, that was just something that we didn't have necessarily the time or the expertise to put it all together. So I think putting that part of it into, and I just looked up, and it did cost us about $4,000 to go with the company that helped with the consulting of the safety policy. But I feel, and Amy can kind of vouch for that because she uses it daily, that it's been very beneficial. And I think even just our seasonal workers, being able to give them that expectation instead of, just kind of, oh, here you go out and work. They knew what was expected of them before they went out, what kind of, things that they needed to be aware of. Okay, Amy, I'll shut up.
You're good, Ramona. Kind of going on what Ramona said, I think it was super beneficial just because they had that expertise in it. We did have, when I started, that one sheet of safety policies, and even in the current updated one, we have, the policies for phones that if you are driving a vehicle, your phone should not be in operation, and it's all, clearly defined out there. If you violate any of these safety policies, these are the precautions that or the steps we go through for altering or changing what you did, and making our SCD a lot better and safer for the function of it all.
Okay, one more follow-up question, because I feel like you guys have a very thorough process. And I feel like there's certain employees or supervisors that would have a hard time getting on board with, like, is that really necessary? How did you get your supervisors on board and see the value in flushing things out to that degree of detailedness?
I think we were very fortunate in that, like I said, during the interview, the supervisor that sat in with Molly that interviewed me was very much, and he's not only just a producer, but he also works in the oil field, and he works with a lot of the different things that we see too, as with employees in HR. And so he was very on board. And so our supervisors, I don't think it was hard to get them on board. And in fact, whenever we brought it up to them, I don't think we had any real problem with it.
Yeah, and I will add on to that our board very much trusts us to do our job. We are very fortunate to have an awesome board that we do, and they trust Molly in most things. If they have any questions, they make sure to ask any questions that they ever arise, and kind of go back and forth on things if it's even necessary, but they all very much agreed that having this handbook for our employees and then the safety policy, you know, would only do good things for our conservation district.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, and I'm glad that your supervisors were supportive of you guys updating or like creating your manuals and everything, because and unfortunately it seemed like it was kind of spurred by a negative experience, but because policy manuals can be kind of overwhelming, that's often what has to happen for
Mhm.
you to kind of get the follow through to start this project and see it through the end and everything. So sometimes I don't like fear tactics and fear mongering, but sometimes there's a time and a place for it. So
I
Absolutely.
agree that that's a lot of times why, even in my previous jobs, that's there's been, you know, something kind of question of something that has happened. Well, is that a policy? And nobody knows because it's not written down, it's not taken care of. And that's usually the why handbooks, especially with smaller companies, kind of come to be in.
right. Like Danny says, it said earlier in our presentation, it helps just be consistent across the board, which is really beneficial for a soil conservation district. Thank you, Williams County. Does anybody else have any questions for Williams County? Okay. I also we asked Dustin on behalf of the Employees Association to share a little bit about the employee handbook that was created. I know they're in the process of updating it and everything, but if Dustin wants to unmute and just share a little bit about that resource and his experience updating it, if he has advice and just what his perspective and take on employee handbooks are, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so that handbook was created, I believe, back in like 95, when it was originally the Employees Association was started. And so probably 2 years ago, I mean, they've added things to it as they've gone through, but 2 years ago we decided there was a lot of outdated stuff in there that needed to go. A lot of the language and stuff like that was just outdated. So we started going through it at our directors meetings, and we used to only go we used to only do directors meetings 3 times a year, and it kind of got tough. So then you know, we started implementing monthly virtual meetings, and now we're into every other month is what we do. And so we started going through the handbook just section by section, and we do 1 or 2 depending how fast we went through it at a meeting, and probably got about halfway through it, and then it stopped and nobody was doing anything anymore. And you know, it's just kind of tough because you're changing employees so much in a employees association like that, when you're only there for 4 years and you can every 2 years you get elected and stuff. So what ended up happening now is Kelly has pretty much taken over that duty, and she is going to go through it and do it, and then all the directors will review it, and then we'll probably motion to pass it and accept the new policy manual is how we're doing it. And if anybody wants to know, it's on our website. We do have a new website. It's .org now, and Hannah was having trouble finding it for that reason, I believe. So I put it in the chat down there, and it's just, as you open the web page, it'll have a explore resources, and as you click that, it'll have employee handbook right there for you know, that's for all the employees across the state, and it's quite the document, but there's a lot of information in there. If you want to know about our district, so they had a policy manual when we started, and what we used to do is when we would add things, so like say comp hours, when comp hours came into play, they just made a motion at that, and we added it to our policy, and then we put the minutes that it was on. So it would have said like January 2013 minutes. And as you can imagine, as you're doing that, your policy manual just gets longer and longer and longer, and you got all these minutes. So what our board decided to do last year, probably 2 years ago too, is we did it at every meeting. We took a section of our handbook and we would go through it and update it. And then at the end of it, our manager is putting it all together. We'll bring it back to the board, and then they will approve the final version of it. And then that'll just take away from the, approved of January 13 or approved of 11 or approved in 2025. And it'll just be one approved policy that'll be at, at 1 month. So yeah, we made our supervisors help out with that one. So.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate you sharing both examples, Dustin, because I think especially the Employees Association example, how you guys tried to involve everybody, and then just that's so real world. And I think
it happens either way. You start something and it just all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's on the back burner. You don't even think about it anymore. So, and
right,
then
we got trees to plant, other fires to put out. I don't really want to update this policy manual anyway. So, but it's with policy manuals, they kind of are, you don't see the value in them until you need them, and then you really need them and everything. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective and how you guys went about updating your manuals. I know it can be really daunting for people. Amber, if you want to go ahead and share our final poll. Again, thank you so much to Dustin and honestly the Employees Association. That handbook is a really great resource that I would encourage you to check out. The link is in the chat and everything, and we will also make sure to be sending a follow-up email with all of the links that got thrown in the chat. But thank you again to Danny and the HR Collaborative. That is a great resource. Thank you to the Williams County crew and Dustin. And yeah, if you could just hang on a few minutes and do our wrap-up survey.
I actually can't find it, so we don't have one apparently.
Okay, well, just kidding. Maybe we'll send out a wrap-up survey when we send out those links and everything, but we just really appreciate it. And if you have additional questions about policy manuals, please feel free to reach out to any of the folks that spoke today or reach out to our team and we can get you connected. Have a great day, everybody.